the No Limit Selling Podcast, where mindset meets sales and leadership. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. And today we have Jeb Blount with us today, who I've wanted on the show for a long time, but things happen when they're meant to happen. So Jeb, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And just for all the audience, my last name is pronounced Blunt, even though everybody in Canada, it's perfect. It's spelled Blount. It looks like Blount, but it's Blunt.
No need to be blunt about it, but that will make me remember it for sure. And so one of the most meaningful books out of your collection of 15 was Fanatical Prospecting. What was the reaction to that book when you released it?
It was it was an interesting book when we released it because books have they tend to take on a life of their own. And it was one of those books that it started off, we had a really good launch, and then it just picked up a wave. And it was sometime in probably like 6 months after the book launched that it really started going bonkers. And today, across the globe through all media, we sold over 1 million copies of the book. We sold more than 500,000 in the United States alone. But it was just one of those books that, as people read it, they liked it, they handed it off to other people. And as an author, you get one of those in a lifetime, maybe. Most people don't. I mean, I got crazy lucky to get a book that Mike Weinberg calls it like the Harry Potter of sales books.
Right.
But it's just one of those books that just catches fire, and it's it's been just an amazing blessing for me. But I tell my publisher all the time is, we may get another one. I don't know which one it'll be, but you're probably not going to get more than that. That's about all you're going to get as an author.
So what's kind of interesting about that book is that a lot of the information in there was, stuff that has been around for a little while, but something about the way you put it together. And it's almost as if people leveraged your trust in that methodology that allowed them to be braver. Does that make sense?
That's a really good way of putting it. I would say that's true. I think that it's not a rocket science book. I did write it in a way that really connected with people, and I hope that all my books are written in a way that makes it easier to access the information. But I love what you said about giving people permission or helping them be more courageous. I think that is something that the book was able to accomplish. I think a lot of people have leaned into prospecting because the book basically just pulled the Band-Aid off the truth, and that is that we can sit around and try to make this a lot easier or more palatable, or some people talk about how they can make prospecting easy, and I just told people the truth. Like, prospecting sucks. You're probably not going to like it. There's not a lot that I'm going to say to make you like it, but if you have an empty pipeline, you're going to have skinny kids, so you're going to have to make a choice. Do you want to be in sales or not be in sales? And if you're making the choice to be in sales, you're going to have to learn how to fill up your pipeline.
Absolutely. It's like one of those things that, what's also interesting is there's a phrase from the Talmud: we do not see the universe as it is, we see it as we are. And so when someone says prospecting, cold calling is dead, it's like, I knew it. That's true.
That's right.
Even though deep down you kind of know that's not true, but you want to believe it so badly that...
Yeah, confirmation bias runs strong in humans, for sure.
So we're going to talk about your new book, The AI Edge. But before we get there, how did you intersect with Anthony? I know you guys know each other, but what about the topic made you guys decide to do it together, as opposed to both of you could have done a book on the subject? Why come together? What brought that about?
It's a great question. So the impetus of this book was back in July of last year.
Mm-hmm.
I was in San Antonio speaking at a conference, and I just remember it because I was in San Antonio, and my publisher from John Wiley, the vice president of publishing there, Shannon Vargo, who I've had a long relationship with, called me and said, we really think that AI is hot, and we really think that it's time for a book for AI for sales, and we can't think of anybody we would rather write it than you. Are you interested? And I said at the time, yes, I'm interested. I'm dabbling in AI. I'm thinking about AI. There's a lot of hype around AI. But I talked to Anthony all the time, and he was doing a lot deeper work in AI. And I thought, well, probably with a subject like this, because it is new and there really isn't any guidebook or playbook. Like, you take Fanatical Prospecting, a lot of what's in Fanatical Prospecting, it's not new ideas. It's just rearranging ideas in a way that makes it easier for people to understand. This is all new ideas. It's all brand new. So would you rather have two minds come together who have maybe some different perspectives, but we have different experiences with this new technology, bring us together with our various frameworks and methodologies that we teach, and some of that converges together? If you do an Venn diagram, like some of it would go together, some of it's apart. Is that going to make a better book? And I started after I talked to Shannon, I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I could do this on my own, but would it be as good and robust as if I did it with someone else? So I called Anthony, are you interested in doing this? He said, sure. Called the publisher back. They went, that's pretty good, because he's there. He works for Wiley as well as me. And then we started writing. Now, the hard thing about this book, Kumar, was that as we started writing the book early on, we would write the book, and then you go to bed at night, you wake up the next morning. I read the Wall Street Journal every single morning. I'd pick up a copy of the Wall Street Journal, and on the front page, and I say copy, these days digital, but on the front page would be an article that would refute everything I just wrote about AI,
hilarious.
because everything had changed. Or you're in the middle of writing it, and the tech companies were changing the brand names of their different bots as we were going, and you've just written 14 chapters, and you've mentioned this one particular bot or robot or AI, and then suddenly you got to go back and fix the name on all of it because they just changed the brand name on it, and you don't want to be out of date before the book is even in print. So what happened was we really struggled at first to just get content written because it was changing. We were experimenting with it. We were trying it with our own sales teams, and then what really helped us out was that in March, April of this year, you began to see the plateau on all of this massive change. And I was taking a look at, there's a professor I think the University of Texas, but he's got this chart that I actually had to see later on, but it shows exactly what we experienced, which was this massive amount of innovation and change, and then a plateau. And then what we're going to see is a little bit of a dip where people are getting used to it. Some of these things are going to wash out that aren't really workable. And then you're going to see another big explosion of change again. And we just caught that wave. And as soon as we started feeling that plateau, writing got a lot easier, and we were able to collect all this together and create a book that should be relevant for at least the next 18 to 24 months, I would expect, in terms of the tech part. The sales part of this book is going to be relevant from now until robots start buying from robots and humans are no longer necessary, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. So, but the tech part will probably be relevant for I'd say at least 24 months, and then we'll do a second edition where we'll go back through and we'll either update the tech piece, change some of the ways that we're interacting with bots, change some of the prompts. Those things will adjust, but the core sales message will stay the same. And I want to make this clear for the folks that are listening and watching. This is a sales book, not a tech book. It's a sales book, not an AI book. The whole book takes you from prospecting all the way to closing and negotiating, and through the core motions that we have to execute as salespeople in order to be good at our craft, and then shows you how you can integrate AI into those motions in a way that allows you to spend more time on the human side of things, less time on the tech and the administrative side of things. And that's what we hope to do, along with helping salespeople, especially around messaging. When you know how this is, if you've ever started, you've got to build something and you're looking at a blank page. It's really hard to start from nothing.
Right.
How do you use AI to get you 75% of the way there or 90% of the way there, so that you can iterate those messages and the things that we're writing, and we can do it in a way that we can move faster and we can be more relevant to our customers.
So I often think about 2000 BC, some Baghdad, there's two camel merchants. One guy's super successful, the other guy isn't. The thought had to occur, what's he doing different than me? And so selling to people and effective sellers have been around for a long time. The earliest sales book that I came across was, I think it was the National Register Company in like the late 1800s, but they had to be like manuscripts from the past. What's the oldest sales book that you've writing that you've come across?
I I think you're in the right place. I think NCR back in the early 1900s, I mean, excuse me, early part of the 20th century, late 19th century, those were their first books. I mean, and essentially what you've described is that industrial level selling has been present in North America. So, and I would say Canada, US, and we can add England, Western world, but in the Western economies has been around for about 125 years. I mean,
Right.
we've been selling since we were put on Earth, and in fact, there's an argument for the origin of language. Our ability to speak to each other was basically created because we needed to do commerce with each other. We needed to trade and be able to sell to each other. So selling is the beginning of language, and but if we look at the pure industrial sales, 125 years. And what's interesting is when you're working in emerging economies like India, for example, which I love working in India and training in India, their entire experience with selling in an economy like we have today is 40 years old. I mean, really, you think about it's about like 1980s that they really started selling there in a way, and they started having an economy that operates more like a Western economy. They really are at the very beginning, and it's interesting to engage there. Whereas here in the U.S., we are way down the line. I mean, we're so far ahead of everyone else, and because I work with companies all around the world, you can see this.
Right.
So with modern selling the way it is, think about everything that we learned, everything that we know, all the essentials and basics. In another way of looking at it would be, think about golf. Golf's been around since, for what, 400 years now or something, some number like that, right?
Yeah.
So the basics and fundamentals of swinging a club and hitting a golf ball haven't changed. The technology changed.
Yeah.
My new AI smoke driver smokes it. It's good, right? But and it's way better than the one that I was using, which was about 20 years old. But the mechanics of the swing haven't changed, right? So if we get into take AI, the mechanics of human to human selling have not changed. Building relationships have not changed. The basics and essentials have not changed. However, apply AI to it, and suddenly the salespeople who step into leveraging this technology to give them more time to sell more, if you think about it that way, all of a sudden now we're in a place where that group of salespeople is going to rise to the top. And essentially what I see in my mind is that the salespeople who are able to adopt and integrate AI into their normal sales motions, these are the folks that are going to be at the top of the food chain as we move forward.
So this would be your target audience, I would imagine. VPs of sales,
Yes.
sizable companies. So if you were starting from scratch, so let's go into that chapter in your book. Like, how do you use AI to find that prospecting list before you start prospecting? So AI and prospecting. Please take it away.
Yeah. So let's go back to what you said before. The first sales book you read was an NCR book from the early 1900s or early part of the 20th century, late 1800s. The fact is that in 125 years ago, we were essentially in the same place we are 125 years later. And that is that we have no idea how to build lists. We suck at it. We're terrible at it. We're terrible at it today. A massive promise for AI is that AI is going to help us build lists. I mean, that is truly the holy grail for AI for sales, is that you come in the morning and AI has been able to take all this disparate information that exists, including intent data and including signals that you get from your own website and things it's picking up off social media and things that are in your CRM, and then looking at what other deals are closing in your company. And you walk in and you've got a list of prospects that have a high propensity to be in a buying window that you can then exploit. That is the holy grail. So if I'm a VP of sales or I'm an executive with a large company, My number one focus should be, how do I leverage AI to build better prospecting lists? Not how do I leverage AI to do prospecting.
Mm.
That doesn't work. We've just experimented with it on email, and the email bots who were supposed to take all the prospecting away and get rid of all the BDRs have essentially killed prospecting. And we may be going down that road when they unleash bots that start calling prospects and acting like human beings. That may be the end of the phone. I have no idea. I mean, we may be going back old school where the only way to prospect is to get on the street and go knock on a door, because robots are relentless. But if I'm a VP of sales, if I'm a CRO, if I'm a company executive, my singular focus right now for my salespeople should be focusing on, how am I able to leverage the tools that are out there available to me? And there are some companies that are doing some amazing things. So one of them is Zoom Info, doing incredible stuff with their Copilot bot or their AI. We're deploying that in our own company, and it's good. And then we've got companies like SalesLoft, who you can combine their bot, their AI, with a Zoom Info AI, and you can starting to dial into your sequences. We've still got a long ways to go in getting sequences completely dialed in, so that we are not only focusing on the right targets, but then we've got the right cadence of prospecting touches and the right channels: phone, in-person, email, social, all of that together in a way that gets us more pipeline. But if I'm a salesperson, my focus needs to be on, how am I using it for messaging? How am I using it to do research for me and to set me up so that I can go do better pre-call planning, and I can show up in discovery meetings and I'm more prepared. The individual salesperson needs to lean into that right now, and those tools are absolutely available to them. If you're in a really big company, you may have to use your own personal accountants in order to use some of these things, because they may cut you off. Right. But if you're a CRO executive, one focus: figure out how you can get AI to get data out of your systems, get data from the web, get data from Zoom Info, and pile that in so you've got your salespeople pointed exactly at the right targets. That's what we have to focus on. And I don't have anything. I've had the answer for it. I would say I've got the exact answer. Here's the formula. I'll take $1 billion. Thank you. But I think every company is going to have to do a little bit on their own. And some of the AI that's going to build this for you, this targeting inside of your CRM, it's going to have to be built specifically for you. It may not even be built on a large language model. It might be built on a narrow language model. So it's going to be a micro AI that sits inside your CRM that takes all this disparate information and pulls it together and builds better lists. And of course, the complexity is going to scale up as the size of your team scales up, or the breadth of your product line, or the number of customers that you have. But you should begin someplace, and the someplace is find the easiest path to start building lists.
So a friend of mine, his name's Conrad Zerini. He runs a Remax office. They've got about 1,000 agents. And one of the things they started doing was saying, okay, we've answered a ton of questions on text, on email over the years. And so they basically created an AI from all of that data, real world answers, and just created their own mini language model just to do that. So
yes,
the ability to do that is becoming easier and easier for small companies, mid-sized companies to do.
Yes.
So before we go to the next step, just an observation. There used to be this 50 million user list. Like, how long did it take radio to get to 50 million users? And I think it was about 40 years for that to happen. TV was about 15 years, and then the internet, then email, and then of course things like ChatGPT happened like in weeks, as opposed to. So this ongoing change. The last time I was at a Sales 3.0 conference, there was a partial list at that point of 50 AI companies in the area of sales.
Yes.
And so there's going to be a lot of players out there. Some will win, some will not. But it's like just a validation that this is here to stay.
Yes.
And either you get on the wave and surf, or you get crushed by the water.
It's true. And the warning shot over the bow for all individual salespeople and sales teams and sales leaders is that those 50 AI companies, and I bet I could build a list of 200. Almost all of them will be gone.
Mm.
None of them, most of them are not going to make it. I mean, there's going to be a handful that are going to make it. And some of them will make it in ways they'll create something unique and they'll get absorbed into another company, or some of them will find themselves in situations where they get merged with another organization and they create something better. Most of them aren't going to be there. One of the core messages in the book is, and this is robot rule number 3, that just because an AI can do something doesn't mean that it should. And we have tons of examples of, of gadgets that we've purchased that do really cool things, but we don't use them because it was just easier to do the thing the way we always did it, because the gadget just made too many steps. It looked cool on Instagram, but it's not actually cool. Same thing with AI for sales. There's a lot of things out there that look really cool, but they're just not workable. They're not feasible. There's no reason for you to do it. You end up spending more time with your bot than you do with customers and clients and prospects, which is completely the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. Instead of spending your time with your bot, you should be spending time with people, and your bot should be giving you time to spend with people. So when we think about that rate of change, everybody is making a promise for everything. Number 2 is that this is expensive. So different than, say, when social media came along. Social media was a game changer for salespeople, like LinkedIn, game changer. But it was mostly free. I mean, you just had to get on and work it. Now, companies like LinkedIn started layering in additional costs, and then there were groups, especially on the marketing side, that brought in all of these solutions to help you manage all the complexity of social media. A lot of them still exist. Many of them don't. And those began adding up. Like, they were expensive, but they weren't nearly as expensive as AI. AI is crazy expensive, and for a couple of reasons. One, it's really expensive for people to run AI. They need a lot of servers. They need a lot of energy. There is, right now there is a lot of doubt in Wall Street whether or not some of these companies are going to be able to take the billions of dollars in investment and then parlay that into actual profits. So the jury's out on that.
So here's just another thought before we move forward. Just an interesting data point. Now there's a resurgence of nuclear reactors.
Yes.
Because the AI farms need electricity.
Yes.
And so kind of tying
and some of these companies are talking about building mini reactors that they own just to run their AI. That's what I'm saying. This is expensive. So when you start layering in AI tools, like you go buy something, I just want to explain this to you. You be prepared for sticker shock. I'm right now spending probably $2,000 a month purely on AI tools. And there's going to be a reckoning at some point soon where we go, okay, we're not spending that much. And we'll cut out 2/3 of that. Like right now we're just experimenting, but it's expensive. So you gotta make sure that you're at least investing in things that are going to give you a return on investment.
Absolutely. Before we go into now that we've got this list, what do we do with it, with AI and ourselves? Before we do that, if I was going to do a task myself, at some point it's not working out, I go, crap, this is not working out. I suspect, this is only a hypothesis, that if I've got some AI tools, that I'm going to actually stay with them a lot longer before I'm willing to put up the white flag. Like there's almost, because the doing of the AI is a good distraction from actually doing. Am I reading that right, or am I just imagining things?
No, I don't. I think it's going to be different for each individual. I truly do believe it's going to be economic. I mean, we also, there's always the sunk cost fallacy where someone will stick with something that's maybe not helping them. There's certainly the distraction of AI. So I'm doing this versus doing prospecting, which is, easy to pull off. But I do think it's going to be economic. I really believe that with AI tools, you have to be really intentional about what you're adopting and bringing on, because to get the most out of them, you got to spend money. Right now, things like Perplexity and Gemini and Copilot and Microsoft, they have a free version that you can use. And Claude, Anthropic's AI, they've got a free version you can use. But they're like the few. Most of the AI tools that are plugged into these large language models, they're charging. There's not a lot of freebies there. So you just got to figure out what are the things that you do, what are the tasks that you do in your day that AI can help you do better. When it comes to large companies, my belief is that AI is going to end up living in the CRM, or it is going to become the CRM in some form or fashion. That's going to be the center of the universe. And what large company sales reps are going to find is that many of these tools are going to just be built into whatever they're using right now. So the same thing what we talk about in here is, for example, teaching your AI to work with you in a way that is meaningful. That's going to happen. It's just not going to happen outside of your company toolbox or your company dashboard. It's going to happen inside your company dashboard. So for example, if you use SalesLoft, you still have to be able to tell SalesLoft what you want it to write and what you want it to look like. And then you have to be able to go edit your bot, because if you just press send, you're going to be highly disappointed. You're going to make some major mistakes. That's not going to change based on whether or not you're using a particular tool inside or outside of your company. If you're in a smaller, medium-sized company and you're a rep, you're going to be much more wild, wild west, where you're going to have a lot more options to test and play with things. Like my salespeople and my team, they're all playing with all kinds of things, and we're using the collective knowledge that we're getting from the team in order to formulate where we want to move forward as an organization in adopting and investing in AI as a company. But for the individual salesperson, if you're in a small or medium-sized company, you're in a place where you really do need to be leaning in and experimenting and not be afraid of it.
So now that we've got a targeted list done, how does the salesperson and the AI play together to actually get those conversations we need, to get the meetings we need?
Say that one more time now.
Oh, so now that we've used AI to help us get like the super targeted list. This is your target, go hunt. Now the salesperson has to go hunt. Traditional way is to pick up the phone and dial, but with AI,
you should pick up the fucking phone and dial.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to say it straight up. AI is not going to do that for you. This is the problem, Umar. The problem is that you have a bunch of tech companies that are pandering to salespeople and companies, and they're saying, we will replace the salespeople and let AI do this. And that's what I said earlier. AI has already failed at this at an epic scale. When we let AI take over email prospecting, we had the list. Now AI is going to do the email prospecting. In 9 months, Umar, they killed email. If you do a poll around companies everywhere you go in the United States, outside the United States, what they will tell you is that their email results from email prospecting have diminished to a point that it's not even worth doing it anymore, because the AI bots killed it. And we've moved into an age where we just Matt Hines said this earlier. It's called the big ignore. So pick up the fucking phone and call people. Get out of your fucking car and walk into a door and go have a conversation. It is your job as a human being to go interact with other human beings, and AI is not going to do that job for you. And we're clear about that in this book. There is no easy button that is going to change that, because the moment that AI starts trying to take the place of you, first of all, as a company, if I'm a CEO or a CRO or a VP of sales, you got to recognize the damage that's going to do to your brand and how it's going to disrupt your sales, because people don't want to buy from robots unless they're buying something off of Amazon that they can already trust. But if your salespeople aren't out talking with people, this doesn't work. If your salespeople aren't leveraging their human advantage to help people make decisions through complex selling situations, this isn't going to work. If your salespeople are spending more time with their bots than they are with people, they're doing AI wrong. That's what we have to recognize. There isn't AI built the list. Now, what's AI going to do next? AI helped you with the list. The next thing is you have to go talk with people, because the more people you talk with, the more you're going to sell. Sorry, you got me on my soapbox on this, but this is what's happening right now. Yeah, the hype is we're going to take over the job of your salespeople, and my frustration with this and my anger about this is that slowly but surely, these tech heads who are building, they're building tech that's seeking a solution, a solution that's seeking a problem. They're just breaking sales completely, because what's happening is executives now, because they've been inundated by AI generated drivel for the last 9 months, we're going on 12 months now. they are just disconnecting completely. If you go poll executives, they'll tell you, I don't respond to any more emails because they're all from robots. So if you're a well-meaning salesperson and you're trying to just communicate one-to-one, you're probably not getting through.
Interesting. So the phone is the way, but uh, so getting the mobile number is like critical because for folks to get through. So what's your best advice for salespeople to, you need to have that phone conversation. The VP of sales is your target. They're well guarded and inundated. How do you get through other than just persistence and call early, call late?
Persistence, call early, call late. You know, you can use data tools like a Zoom Info or a Seamless or Apollo. You can use those tools and you can get cell phone numbers off of there, which I do. You can go meet them at conferences. You can make sure that when you're interacting with people, you get their mobile numbers. But the only way of getting through is you got to pick up the phone and you got to call them. And like that doesn't mean that you wouldn't send an email, and it certainly doesn't mean that you're not going to connect with them on social media. And if you have the means to do it, go walk through their door or even send a snail mail. A guy sent me a handwritten note the other day. I picked up the phone and called him because it was a really nice note, even though it was a sales call. It was a sales note. So you got to go do those things. We're not going to take away that burden. You have to go talk with people. And it's, when you say they're well guarded, they were well guarded in 1990. It was hard to get to people then. So you're going to have to learn how to use voice messaging, and you're going to have to learn how to send video messages, and you're going to have to learn how to engage them in unique ways on, say, LinkedIn. You're going to have to learn how to walk up to them at a conference and have the courage to say hello to them. You're going to have to do that, and you're going to have to pick up the damn phone and call people.
Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. So tell me about a chapter in the book that I haven't asked about that people need to know about, so they go, oh my God, I need that book.
Yeah, I think that this is probably not going to be something that's going to like drive people to, hey, I got to use the book. So throughout all the chapters, we have hundreds of prompts. So if there's nothing else, then we'll show you, for example, how do you, let's say you're a field sales rep and you're walking into a door, how can I use AI to give me a couple of questions that I can ask walking in that would be relevant to that particular business? That's a prompt that's in there. But my favorite chapter is a chapter on writing and messaging. And I believe it's chapter 19. Let's see here, make sure I've got the right chapter. Yeah, it's chapter 19. It's called If It Quacks Like a Duck. So chapter 19. Wow, I turned right to it. How about that? So this, I think, is probably the best chapter in the entire book. And it's about what happens when people realize that what you gave them was AI generated and the damage that can do to your relationships. So that chapter leads into what the salespeople need to do to be able to use their AI to build better sales messaging. This is a big topic for salespeople everywhere. Always has been. What do I say? What do I write? What should my message be? And AI offers us just an endless ability to create messaging faster, but it walks you through what happens when you don't invest in your own understanding of grammar and how things should be written. It walks you through what happens when you trust your AI, because it will lie to you. It lied to me yesterday. I was looking for a study on ChatGPT, and it cited a study from the University of Florida that never happened. It didn't even exist. And so always trust and verify. And it tells a true story of a tech executive who realized that the information that someone was giving him was completely generated from ChatGPT, and what happened to that relationship the moment that they realized that. Because at the end of the day, we're selling to people, and people want to know that you're investing in them, that you're putting effort into it, and that you care enough to have work to get their business. And when they know that you haven't, that becomes a real problem. So chapter 19 sets off my favorite chapter in the entire book. And I think that group of chapters around building better messaging and using AI to help you connect with your prospects through the written word and the spoken word, how crucial it is that you learn how to interact with your bot in a way that makes that powerful and not awkward and cheesy.
So the underlying theme of the conversation so far today, I would say, is trust.
To
Trust
some
in
extent,
yourself,
yeah.
trust in the system, because ultimately the sales relationship is one of trust. where the person that is buying from me trusts in me and through association in the product and service that I'm providing or the reviews.
Yeah.
So as we move in this faster and faster world, a lot of people would say younger generations are more comfortable with texting and that face to face. So, is how is trust changing? Trust is essential, but the mechanisms are changing and the speed is changing. How do we maintain that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you got to. I mean, there's a massive problem with trust. If you look at, if you just take the data on this, we go back into the 1960s. Most people said most people could be trusted. If we ask the same group of people today, just in general, so across all generations, less than 40% of people say that most people can be trusted. So we've had a massive what do you
Erosion.
call it? Just depreciation of trust. And your younger generation, so you take millennials and Gen Zs, that trust factor is even lower. So now you move into the world of AI, and there was a beautiful article about this a few months back in the Wall Street Journal around how once people realize that they're dealing with a bot, it corrupts all of their relationships with a company or with an individual. That I think is super important, because as a human being, if we believe that we're dealing with a human being and we find out that we're dealing with a bot, that feels like manipulation. If I know I'm dealing with a bot, that's cool. And I know when I'm dealing with a bot, sometimes it comes up and it says, "Hey, I'm a robot." And that's fine. It's generally an awful experience because a robot runs in circles because it can't really perceive and answer good questions. But if you tell me I'm speaking to a person and I find out it's a robot, whoo, that's bad. And the same thing will happen when you're running call centers and you've got people calling in and your robot is answering questions. If the robot doesn't reveal itself to be a robot, and then we later on find that I'm talking to a robot, that can blow the trust you have with the organization. So the biggest issue with trust right now is that once I see that something comes from a robot, what I do at that point is then I discount the validity of all things that way. So if there's an image that I'm looking at and I later find out that image was AI generated, then every image I look at from there on, I distrust because I don't know whether it was real or was AI generated. So the validity of that particular image begins to diminish in my view. So, and that was what the Wall Street Journal article is about, how that's how the human brain works. This is why we've killed email, because, and I'll give you just a brilliant example of this. Last week, I got an email. It was a prospecting email, but it had an interesting subject line. So I opened it. The moment I opened it and started reading the message, I knew that it was written by a robot. So the subject line got me. The message itself was clearly written by a robot, because robots leave really telling patterns when they write things. And this one was a blatant pattern that I could tell. So immediately I just deleted it and blocked it. And in today's world, when I feel like I'm being manipulated by a robot, in the old days, it was a salesperson and I just thought it was a dumb message, I would just delete it. In the new days, I'd block whatever the URL it is. I block it completely because I don't want to get any messages by robots. Okay, but here's what's interesting. So I closed the email up, deleted, blocked it, and I went back to what I was doing. It wasn't 20 minutes later, I came back to my computer. I had 6 more prospecting emails from 6 different salespeople. We don't even know if they exist, because we've also noticed that we're getting emails from salespeople who aren't real people. They're just names. And this was what was really bad. They were from 6 different companies, all with the exact same subject line. So what had happened? AI said, "Oh, we sent an email to Jeb. He opened this email up based on this subject line. Therefore, we should do more of that." Right. But you get 6 different emails from 6 different reps from 6 different companies. Yes, you know exactly what happened. So what happened to all of those folks? Every one of them got deleted and blocked. So now none of those companies have the ability to interact with me via email, because they have been completely blocked as a top line URL from getting to me. The only way to get to me is they have to change their URL to come back in, and I'd probably block them again if I noticed that a robot wrote it. So that's what's happening right now. That's what we're entering this period of time where your messaging is getting ignored by executives, because you imagine if you're a CEO of a company or a head of sales or a CRO, that happens to you a couple of times and you're like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to try to filter out the ones that are real from the ones that are bots. So therefore, all prospecting email is never going to get opened. That's the problem that we're facing right now.
Interesting.
And so from a trust standpoint for salespeople, Chris Bill from Connect and Sell said this first, and I've repeated it a bunch of times, but I want to give him credit for it. He basically explained that in the world of AI, where everything can be faked, music can be faked, songs can be faked, voices can be faked, the only thing that can be trusted is what you and I are doing right here. Synchronous real-time conversations with another human being. And if they figure out how to fake you on video, then the only thing that will be trustworthy will be in person. So trust. I mean, what you said about trust, profound. You absolutely nailed it. So this trust factor is a big deal. But let's just think about it at a base human level. If I'm a buyer and you're a seller, I respect you more when you invest in the process with me, when it means something to you, when you're trying, when you're demonstrating that you really want my business. I have less trust and less respect in you if you're AIing it in. Like all of your work is generated by an AI. All of your follow-up is by an AI. Like you have no human touch on it whatsoever. Then I know that you don't really care about me. I mean, you can just push that button a million times. I'm not that important. So suddenly, from being a trusted advisor or being someone I'm building a relationship with, is you're just one of many that are all the same. And how am I going to make a decision? I'm going to make a decision based on how much it costs, not the value that you deliver, because you never got the opportunity to demonstrate that value because I don't trust you because you AI'd it in. So I think that's where we have to start thinking as salespeople. You've got to step in the shoes of salespeople and are your buyers and leverage your human advantage.
Yeah, the word that came up as you were describing all of this is betrayal. It's like
Yes.
when you're pretending to do that. So there's a
Yeah.
trust thing. I could lie to you about something. Our system does this, which erodes the trust. But if it's like I'm totally faking you out and making a fool of you, quote
Yes.
unquote, that may not be my intention. But if you feel that betrayal lasts a lot longer than
It is. So I love that you use that word. That to me is what it is. It's betrayal. It's feeling manipulated. If it's an existing customer, it can feel like you're being taken for granted. Like the
yeah.
company's making no investment to keep you as a customer, and we just have to recognize that that's how we are as human beings. And honestly, it doesn't make a difference if you are a 23-year-old Gen Z or a 65-year-old Gen X. It doesn't matter. We're still human beings. Our brains work the same. And this fallacy that Gen Z just wants to text is completely bogus when you start looking at all the studies of how Gen Z is spending so much more time with each other in person, building relationships
The
because,
experience, yeah.
yeah, because they've realized that being by themselves and sitting around poking around on a phone all day long is lonely, and it creates a lot of other issues as a human being for you.
So this was like I think about a year and a half ago, I was interviewing a professor from Northwest University, I think. He's got a bachelor's program in sales. And as we're doing the podcast, he goes something like, this year's students are, and my mind went lazy, shy, but that's not what he said. He said that the most boldest driven people I've had in
Hmm.
a very, very long time. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on for a minute. What are you talking about? And so what he was saying was this, is that when they were 7 or 8 years old, those pivotal years when you go from like child to you
Hmm.
start looking at the world critically, was when the financial crisis was happening in '07, '08, and their parents were losing their jobs, losing their homes. There was insecurity around food. And he says all those kids grew up with a recession, depression mentality.
Hmm.
And that just made them like, it's up to me. I'm going to do it. I'm driven. And I thought, isn't that really interesting how those formative years, if you are coddled, you turn out a certain way, if it's tougher. And the next thought was very much, I wonder what would happen for the kids that were 7 or 8 during the pandemic. Because before the pandemic, if you asked any American, what's the most important thing? Family, then work, then this. But the reality was work was the most important. And the other stuff was like secondary, except for the pandemic. All the meals were spent together. There was like this rich period. I wonder how that's
Yeah.
going to change that generation on how they think of family compared to other generations, because it would have been this like really formative time together.
It's a fascinating thought. It is. I think that this crop of Gen Zs that are coming up more match how my generation came up in terms of self responsibility and
Mm,
drive, probably than any generation I've seen in between. I would echo that. I think that's there. I think the millennials grew up more coddled.
mm,
I think Gen Zs have come up and they've got a lot more. I think they just have a lot more overall drive. I'm not. This is not taken away from millennials. This is generalization, but I would agree with that. But I do think it's fascinating that I didn't realize that you think about when they came up in the financial crisis, because we came up in the middle of the inflationary 1970s energy
oh
crisis,
yeah, laying upset the gas
massive,
pumps. Yeah.
massive political turmoil, Vietnam, like all of that was happening during my formative years. That 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, that was all then, and you kind of came out of that thinking, you gotta make this on your own, or you're not gonna make it. So. And then of course, you have the World War II generation, so they all came up at a very similar time. So it's it's hard to know, and it's hard to know where we're going to end up in AI. And it could be that everything that we're talking about could just be moot, because it just gets normal for human beings to just talk with robots. And Ulysses over here, he's my producer. He named ChatGPT Hal today. They had a really good conversation, and ChatGPT said he would be Hal if he wanted him to be Hal. And they're joking to each other and telling each other. I mean, I'm like, that's his friend now. So Ulysses doesn't need people. He's got Hal. Who
So
knows? I mean, we may be in that situation.
I think so. I think it's going to be really interesting what is a human, and going to be like really interesting questions to consider. But before we run out of time, very much, Jeb, you meet a lot of people, you're training a lot of people, you work with a lot of companies. Tell me of a recent time where you had an epiphany where somebody's doing something that either gave you a new idea, or a new viewpoint of something you already knew, and you went, like, do you have one of those things that came up where you just got this epiphany?
I get epiphanies all the time. Is typically because I work with sales teams that have
Mm,
different sales motions. And I would say the most recent one was there are a class of salespeople who their entire prospecting motion is long-term nurturing and anticipating future buying windows. So typically salespeople with a much smaller prospecting base, or a potential client base, and how they do that really matters. So that process of covering those accounts and building those relationships and doing it in a meaningful way, without overdoing it, but setting themselves up when a buying window opens, that they're in the driver's seat. As I'm working on a playbook for a particular client in that space, that was a massive eye opener for me, that those many salespeople get super transactional in those relationship driven businesses, because there's not action immediately. And so how do they build those long-term cadences? So I'm pulling that perspective into a new book that I'm writing called Fanatical Prospecting Sequences, and
mm.
leveraging it for that group of salespeople. And it was just an aha moment for me, as I was trying to help an organization fix some issues with their go-to-market strategy and selling. And I think the big part was, what are the signals that a buying window is opening, and how are we getting ourselves in position to win long before that happens?
Oh, brilliant. So the last question for you is this. When you look at sales teams, oftentimes there's individual sales people, and sometimes, or how often do you come across where it's like, Jane, if she could just be more decisive, it would be a game changer. Or if Brent could be more diplomatic, or uh, that psychological piece where they know the sales process, they're doing really well, but they could step into greatness if they could overcome some kind of hurdle. Does that happen a lot, or do you see that quite often where you can diagnose really easily, but it's a psychological thing as opposed to a process
Every
thing?
day, everywhere, everyone. So every salesperson is going to be a little bit different. And selling is a skill position. So it's no different than elite athletics to
Mm,
me. And I can give you the mechanics of here's what you do. You got a prospect put in the pipeline. You've got to qualify. You've got to go do deep discovery. You've got to build a business case that is compelling. You've got to present the business case in a way that's compelling. You have to ask for the business at some level. You have to deal with objections. You have to negotiate. You have to deliver. Like you can look at it that way. And in each one of those stages, there's basics and fundamentals. But every single day, as we're training salespeople and we're teaching salespeople, those salespeople walk out of training and they're all performing at a different level coming
mm,
out of training. If you could just teach people and it would work, and they were all getting the same thing, it would be fine. But the fact is that you have to coach in between. I mean, this is the whole purpose of having sales leaders, is that you're going to have a salesperson, and if they were just to do this thing, they would get a breakthrough. Or if this salesperson did this thing, they would
mm.
get the breakthrough. That's why we do coaching, is because it's not the mechanics that are so important. It is the mindset, right? It's what's in between their
Right.
ears. It's in a particular situation, they get a little bit, how would you say it? They get a little bit insecure. And
Right.
in fact, I had a conversation with one of my salespeople this morning that in July was just opening up these conversations with warm leads, not hot, warm, but he was getting these things opened up and he was nailing down appointments, and then that stopped. So I went back and listened to calls, and back then he would just keep working and get him in a conversation, and it would end up with him saying, okay, well, I want some more. And then lately he's just been giving up. Like they say, I'm not interested. He just goes, okay. And he goes away. And then we noticed that at the top of the call, he was saying things that sounded insecure.
Right.
Well, okay, so something happened between the ears here that changed something that he's really talented at doing. That's what I said this morning. I said, you have a unique talent at being able to get people who are not really interested in engage in a conversation and create interest, so we can at least move into a discovery step with them. Somehow that stopped. And it just sounds like there's a little bit of insecurity. Why would that happen? Got a couple of losses, things didn't go his way, and so you start reverting to
Safer territory.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly right. So I used golf as an analogy earlier, using a golf club, but same thing. Like, I know the mechanics of hitting a golf ball. I know it. I can watch people hit golf balls and go, okay, I can see what you're doing. And I played yesterday and I hit some brilliant shots, also some really crappy shots. Why did I hit crappy shots? Well, why did I hit brilliant shots? I mean, if you think about
Right.
it, it is, what was I thinking on that hole? Was I staring at the water instead of the hole? Or, I have a tendency of getting my arms out too far from my
Mm,
body. So what did on that shot, did I not pay attention to telling myself I needed to do this? If my coach was sitting next to me, we would have fixed it right there on
yeah.
the golf course, right? But he wasn't there. So I'm having to fix that on my own. And the reason that I go to a coach and spend time with a coach is because my coach can see things I can't see. And then when I come back from coaching, I'm typically a better golfer, but allow a month to go by, and what happens? Old habits come back into play. The things that I'm used to doing come back into
Right.
play. My self-doubt comes back into play. I make a couple of really bad shots, and then I start adjusting and I over adjust. All of that's in play. And it's the same thing in
And
sales.
and even Tiger Woods does that. He gets the yips
Yes.
now and then.
Yeah.
So kind of my area of expertise is resolve one issue in 1 month guaranteed. And is very much, I'll just tell you a quick story. One of my realtor clients, he's got a belief in his head, I'm too young for this business.
Yeah.
And so cure that in a month, and just sets the world on fire. So we don't teach him a thing about selling or real estate, but just get that belief out of his head,
Yeah.
and it does magic. And at the end of the day, it's humans are still going to be here. I think paperwork might be here longer than humans, but humans will be here for a long time, and AI is going to augment.
Yes.
Jeb, thanks so much for being on the show. It was insightful, and I'm going to be looking at the transcript to go back to some of the notes and some of the things you
Good.
said.
Well, when you go back, look at the part that says pick up the phone and call people. Go have a conversation and talk with people, because that's what we were put on earth to do. And I love that analogy with the I'm too young to be here. I mean, I totally get that. Like, I understand like that self-doubt you put in, and that's the thing. Like, that's human. So go be human.
Go be human. Stay for a second after the show ends to go in the green room.
Okay.
The No Limit Selling Podcast, where mindset meets sales and leadership.